Welcome back. We've been talking with Peter Singer, author of Ghost Fleet and senior fellow at the New America Foundation. Well, Wall Street Journal described you as the premier futurist in the national security environment. And by reading your book, it's described as fiction, but it's regarding the United States, China, and Russia, their relationship, and how they're using cybersecurity as a means of waging war. And like you were saying earlier about the war of information.
So the book is, just like you hit it, it's fiction. It's about a war that hasn't happened and hopefully never will. It's looking at what might happen if there was an actual outbreak of conflict between the US, China, and Russia. Think of it as a little bit akin to a Tom Clancy style techno thriller. But the difference with Clancy and other novels is that it combines with nonfiction. So it's a novel, but the rule was every single technology in it, no matter how science fiction it might seem, every scene in it has to have some kind of backing from the real world. It has to be something that's played out elsewhere or documented elsewhere. So it's this kind of smash up of science fiction and science reality. And one of the things that comes from playing that out is that it's attracted a pretty strong fan following, so to speak, within the US military, because it visualizes a lot of things that they wrestle with. In fact, reflected meeting with a lot of people in the military on what they thought they might be doing. And also it lays out how modern day conflicts would be different from the types that we've been fighting for the last several generations. Think of it as a smash up and turn of World War II style battles at sea or in the air, but crossed with these new technologies that we were talking about, cyberspace, maybe even operations in outer space. What happens when all of these come clashing together? And then, of course, different from when you're dealing with a Taliban or an ISIS. What happens when the other side has similar technology to you, when they've got stealthy jet fighters, when they've got robotics, when they're able to carry out hacks? And so it's been a real fun experience to sort of share the entertainment side with people, but also see how it's been used by the military for training and education.
I'm so glad that you mentioned ISIS and some of these other terror groups, because when we think of the United States, for instance, and how advanced we are technologically, when you do compare us to some of these other countries that don't seem like they would be as technologically advanced, the reality is we've got to run for our money here. So what would you say are either our shortcomings in the United States, and what are some of the things that we should be improving on to make ourselves really competitive and ahead of everybody else?
Yeah, we're, as a nation, when it comes to science and technology, resting on our laurels. We're ahead of strategic competitors like a China, but they're in some areas catching up, and in other areas maybe even surpassing us. And it's in so many different, the cutting edge fields of technology. For example, the world's fastest supercomputer, made in China, only with Chinese parts. Or artificial intelligence. China has a national strategy for it. We don't. And there's so many different things that could be done and should be done when we think about how we can keep ahead or catch pace with this. And it hits everything from restoring science and technology training in our schools, from the elementary level all the way up to our university level. Instead, we have this sort of, our universities are one of the strategic advantages of the United States. They've been one of the things that have put us ahead, and yet they're under siege from state legislatures right now. It's really odd. We have, the debates on immigration. Are we attracting the world's best graduate students, or are we trying to kick them out? Attracting them is what helped us stay ahead during the Cold War. Kicking them out is what's going to make us lose the next version of the Cold War. To spending on research and development, it's really spotty when you look about it across the government. So there's some areas where we've increased spending on R&D, for example, within the Pentagon on cybersecurity R&D. But then when you look at it in all these other agencies that matter beyond, so for example, even Homeland Security, the new budget cut the research and development budget for cybersecurity, or in another area like NIST. So it's really, essentially, we got to start thinking again. We got to have a strategy. you can't, to be blunt, tweet your way out of this problem.
Well, speaking of education, I think the cost of education is one way that we can certainly improve on getting more people recruited into some of these fields, but that's a discussion for another time, Peter. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and for any of the information that you just heard, you can also find it on our website, foxcharleston.com. Coming up next, the defense industry pumps billions of dollars into South Carolina's economy, but what does the future hold? We're back after this.